Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Mochen Leira online smicha. We all know the famous Gemara. The Gemara is in Maseches Brachos, Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis. The Gemara talks about Chalomes, and the Gemara connects what you can learn, what signs are there when you have a chalom about different things. What kind of simanim does that relate to the person? So there's a section of the Gemara in Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis where the Gemara talks about what happens if you see different animals. So I'm going to speak about some of the animals that he says, and then we'll concentrate specifically about the Camel, about the camel. So the Gemara says, "Haroya chamar b'chalaim." If somebody sees a donkey in a dream, yitzapa liyeshua. You should hope for the Yeshua, for the salvation. Shenamar, because the pasuk speaks about Mashiach, and the pasuk says, Hine malkech yovelach. The pasuk in Zechariah says that your melech is coming. Tzadik v'noishehu, he's a very righteous person. Ani v'roichev al chamar. He will be dressed like a poor man riding on a donkey. So this seeing a chamar in your dream is a sign from Mashiach. The Gemara goes on to say, Haroya chatul b'chalaim. If you see a cat in your dream, it depends. If it's Asra the Kartale Shunra, if you're living in a city where they call a cat Shunra, then that's a siman Nasis Le Shira Noah. That's a sign that a new positive song was made for you. In other words, that you have a Gezeres Toivus, new brachas you will be showered with new brachas, and you'll be singing and praising to Hashem. That's where Shunra is Maloshin Shira Noah. However, if you live in a city where they call it Shinra, says the Gemara, that's a bad sign. Rahman al-Atlan, because that Shinra could be played around the words as Nasale Shinra, means something bad is happening. Okay, so we have the donkey and we have the cat. Then the Gemara goes on to say, Haroya Sus Lovim B'chalaim, if you see a white horse, Bein Benachas, Bein Beraduf, no matter if the white horse you see in the dream is settled, quiet, or the white horse is running, that's a good sign, yafali. If you see a adam, you see a red horse, if it's benachas, if the red horse is staying stable, then yafa, that's a good sign. If it's beraduf, if the red horse is running, that's kasha, that means it's a sign for bad things. Then the Gemara says, Haroya gamol b'chalaim, one who sees a camel in a dream. Says the Gemara, a camel is a siman, that God forbid, that Mr. Niksalai, he did something that a punishment of death was supposed to happen for him, Min HaShamayim, but he was saved from it. In other words, something bad was meant to happen, God forbid, but he was saved. And the Gemara brings a raya, Amar Abcham B'Rab Chanina, my Kra, from which pasuk do you know this? You know this from the pasuk, the Eibishter says, when the Yidden go to Mitzrayim, the pasuk says, "V'noichi ered imcha Mitzrayim." I promise, I will go with you in Mitzrayim. V'noichi a'alcha gam oloi, but I will also bring you back. So gam oloi, the Mefarshim say, gam oloi sounds like the word gamo. So in other words, you're going to Mitzrayim, but I will take you out. So seeing a gamo, which is the same words of gam oloi, is a sign that you could have, God forbid, gone through a terrible time, but the Eibishter hopefully takes you out. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar mehacha. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak brings the raya from a different place, because the pasuk says in Shmuel, Gam Hashem hever chatascha. Hashem promises that He erases your sin. Lo yisamos, God forbid, you won't die. So when it says Gam Hashem, so the Gam is very similar to the word Gamo. And the pasuk says Lo Yisamos, so that's a raya that if somebody sees a gamol b'chalaim, that's a siman that something could have happened, Rahman al-Than, and Hashem saved you. Then the Gemara says Haroya pil b'chalaim, somebody sees an elephant in his dream, plois nasalei, great wonders were done to him. Pilim, if you see many elephants, pile plois, he had many wonders. And the Gemara asks, I went through a whole list of animals. The Gemara asks, we find that any animal, we found the Bryce is a good sign in a dream. chutz min apil min akay, besides for an elephant and a monkey. So why suddenly we interpret it different? And for the Gemara, like Kashya, that's not a question. We're talking about an elephant. The difference is if misarig, if there is a saddle on the elephant, that's a good sign. If the loy misarig, that's a bad sign, because the sign of him having a saddle on his back shows that he lives between people. It's not just a wild animal. That's the Gemara. Now, we already know that all the names that were given to all creatures of the world were given by Adam Rishon. Everything had to pass by Adam Rishon, and based on the source of his life, Adam Rishon knew what to call that. And even animals, and we know the Mefarshim say Aryeh, Malashon Yira, it instills fear. Kelev, a dog, is Kulei Loev. What is Gamel? So, in generally, they interpret Gamel one of two ways. Either like Goimel Chasadim, giving. Animal is a giver, and people don't understand what's the specialty of a camel for this. Or Goimel could also mean Gamel, finished. Vayi Gamel, he graduated, or finished, it's over. In other words, it nurses for a period of time, and then it stops nursing. Now, both of these reasons doesn't make the camel any different than any other animal, so we have to understand why specifically the camel has this. Others say that the finish means that it drinks. Every other animal has to continuously, very often, resupply itself. An animal could take a lot of water and go a long time without water, so it fills itself, it's finished and it's loaded. But even that needs explanation. We find in the Torah two places where the camel are mentioned, many places, but two interesting places. By when Eliezer takes Avram Avinu's camels to Rivka, so over there it says, the Medrash says that you were able to tell the difference between Avram Avinu's camels and everybody else. Avram Avinu's camels were muzzled in a way that they just couldn't eat anywhere. Every other animal goes and grazes and eats at and even Me'agezel, but Avram Avinu's camels were muzzled. Another thing it says in Avis D'Rab Nosson Perek Chavches that Avram Avinu's camels couldn't walk into a barn, couldn't walk into a place where there was Avodah Zarah. Even their animals, the camels, had that treated that way. By Yaakov Avinu it says that Yaakov Avinu sent to Esav Behemoths Ugmalim, animals, and amongst the animals the pasuk lists off camels, but yet when the pasuk lists off camels, you see something very unique. The pasuk says that he sent, Yaakov sends Izim, assign goats, Shepselach, rams, but by Gemalim, by camels, it says Meinikos, ones that nurse. And the commentaries, and then there's also a couple of differences how he describes the camels being given as a present and all other animals. And some want to say that this is something that today we still haven't figured out, but it's definitely true that there is something unique about the camels, that a mother camel and a baby camel are much more attached than any other animal. And therefore, when you stress the word Meinikos, as long as it didn't grow up to be on its own, you cannot separate the mother from the baby even more than any other animal. There's a fascinating story that's brought with a tremendous lesson of a certain shaykhid who was a simpleton, but from when he was very young, he was trained with a big fat mistake, and based on that mistake, he, God forbid, did something wrong. What was the story? There was a shaykhid in a place in some suburb of Shechem. It was and people would bring him their shepselach or whatever to shecht. One time they ran out of meat, so instead of a shepsel, he bought a small camel. He bought a small camel and he shechted it. And they sold the meat. Amongst the people who bought the meat, there was somebody that knew the taste of a camel, and he came complaining. He said, "This is not. You're not selling beef here. You're selling camel." So he said, the shaykhid, who was a simpleton, said, What are you talking about? It's not a big problem. It's kosher. Why is it kosher? Because in Parshas Shmini, when the Torah tells us the kosher animals and non-kosher animals, if you look at the trup on the word gamo, it's betam gadol. It's with a loud voice, meaning to say, a tam gadol, meaning only a big camel can't be eaten, but a baby camel you're allowed to eat. And he thought that was allowed. So one of the people said this story said that the tradition says that they took that sheicher to the Beis HaKnesses of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and they gave him malchus for what he did. And the sheicher was screaming, "But what do you want me to do? This is how I was taught. I was taught only a big camel, but a baby camel you're not allowed. You're allowed to." So they said, "What should we do? Your teacher is not here. The one who taught you this false information is not here. So you'll have to take the punishment for your teacher."